Hey YouTube, the Dahlia is finally here, and if you're a fan of Break, dust off your Firefly, Rappa, Boot Hill, and any other classic Break design characters as they make a breakthrough to the scene. A classic Nihility character, the Dahlia's main role is to allow your Break characters to immediately deal super break damage, without needing to completely destroy their toughness bars. At just E0 S1, she's got a relatively complete design for a Break support, providing weakness implant, break and speed buffs, and a good chunk of toughness break herself. On top of that, front-loaded super break damage, making her a staple among break comps. My name is Xlice, and in this video we'll be covering everything you need to know about the Dahlia, her kit, builds, Eidolons, team comps, pull value, and showcasing her power at E0 S1. I will be using premium signature light cones, but that may be out of reach for some of you, so I'll be sure to cover alternatives later on in the video. Since this is going to be done on the CE server, of course, that means things are subject to change for full release, so keep that in mind. If you enjoyed the guide, I would really appreciate a quick thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe for future releases, and let me know in the comments what you think about the Dahlia. First, a full guide on how she works. So just taking a look at her design, she seems, well, very humble and a daring individual. Kinda reminds me of Yuno Gasai from Mirai Nikki, or Yumeko from Kakegurui, or maybe even some resemblance to Your Forger from Spy Family. Well, looking relatively respectfully. Anyways, fire type, Nihility has break effect, fast speed, ERR if you need it, but not necessary since her ultimate is pretty generous ability. Here's a core breakdown of her goods. So, she's a pretty normal character by current standards, which is kinda nice since our previous was the Amphoreous potluck of buffs with Cyrene. She's got no Memo Sprite, she has a 130 energy cost ultimate, a zone deploying skill that her tooltip will show the duration of, a technique that gives you a free skill cast, and a standard talent that describes more or less the extra gimmicks she provides at the team. The most important ability that will matter to you is her skill. This deploys a 3-turn zone and deals blast damage to the primary and surrounding targets. Refer to her tooltip for how many turns it has left, and like most characters, it'll decrease by 1 only on her turn. The zone will provide weakness break efficiency by 50%, think like Ruanmei's skill, but also enables super break damage to happen even when enemies aren't fully broken yet. This is by far the most important addition to the Super Break lineup, which now allows them to have access to that juicy damage right away, and they no longer need to wait until break bars are fully broken to deal decent damage. Now what about those toughness locked enemies, like those pesky trotters? Even those guys cannot escape. With the Dahlia's change, super break damage now always occurs regardless of what stage their toughness bar is in. Not only that, but our technique will also deploy one of these skill zones at the beginning of battle, saving you from that initial SP usage. However, it does not count as a free skill cast, so she won't gain any of the energy associated with an ability usage. But don't worry, since her talent will give her 35 energy upon entering combat, allowing you to be within range of ultimate cast after just one basic attack. This can be done even with base 100% ERR, so it's guaranteed ultimate uptime without an ERR rope. Now before we jump into her ultimate, let's cover all the extra stuff in her talent. So there's the 35 energy to the Dahlia upon entering combat. Also, it designates this dance partner, which you can easily see above your character's icons. It prioritizes the ally you entered combat with, or it'll automatically choose the highest break effect teammate, both of which is usually the same character, your main super break carry. So dance partner will be on the Dahlia herself and your main super break carry. Both will gain super break damage conversion at 60%, and then Dahlia gains an extra follow-up attack that deals 5 instances of bounce damage to random targets that also have super break damage conversion at 200%. This follow-up attack is her tooltip icon right next to those 3 dots that show her zone duration, and it will only activate 1 time per her own turn before going on cooldown. This follow-up attack will automatically activate after your main carry dance partner attacks an enemy, and it generates a little bit of energy every time it's used. Now we're back to her ultimate. So this ability inflicts a def debuff called Wilt on all enemies for 4 turns and deals AoE fire damage to all enemies. Also applies the weakness type of both dance partners to all enemy targets. So if you're running Firefly Dahlia, you'll only implant fire. But for example, if you're running Rappa with Dahlia, this will implant fire and imaginary. With a 130 energy cost and 4-turn duration, her ultimate uptime is pretty generous, allowing you to skip ERR rope in favor of pure break effect. Within those 4 turns, you'll gain 4 follow-up attacks worth of energy and 3 basics and 1 skill usually for her zone duration, which should guarantee you always have ultimate on the right timings. Unfortunately though, her ultimate is not multi-wave, so if you clear wave 1 really fast, you'll need to be a bit aggressive on her skill usage to get her ultimate back up as soon as possible. So that's the basis of her gameplay. All you gotta do is make sure her zone is up, apply an ultimate depth debuff whenever available, and you're good to go. Since you don't need to spam skill every single turn, she's generally SP positive since you can basic attack to fill her turns. Now I'll run down on her buffs. A2 Trace. This one gives break effect to all your allies, but it has a 3-turn duration and a caveat that she needs to receive healing or a shield. With Ling Sha or Gallagher, this is not an issue, but if you plan to run Sustainless break comp, then you'll get less value out of this buff. It's worth mentioning that Sustainless will still be stronger overall. This bonus break effect mainly serves to increase the strength of the standard Sustain comp and bring it within reasonable difference to Sustainless. The amount converts from 24% of the Dahlia's own break effect plus 50% flat. So with 200% break effect on the Dahlia, she'll provide 98% break effect to all allies. You don't need to go too crazy on this, since the main benefit is the flat 50%. So for example, even if the Dahlia is 100% break effect, she'll still be providing 74% buff. A4 Trace grants 1 SP every 2 follow-up attacks used. Just generally a nice QOL for skill spammy comps. A6 Trace. This one gives 30% speed to an ally that implants weakness, and also specifically grants fire characters extra toughness reduction and generates their max energy. This also affects the Dahlia herself, so her ultimate will be refunding energy back to herself since it does implant weakness. With all this quality of life, her energy needs are pretty self-sufficient, allowing you to build her max break. Now let's talk about our super break DPS, and this is where things get a little unfair. So the obvious big winner, Firefly. She implants weakness, and she's a fire character, meaning she gets the 30% speed bonus, the extra toughness reduction, and the energy funnel. These bonuses are so valuable for her that her best in slot build can now use attack boots instead of speed boots and still hit 200 speed threshold. And then, when her ult ends, it only takes 1 E to get back into Sam form instead of 2. Boot Hill will only be able to get 30% speed bonus. And Rappa, unfortunately, she gains no value here at all. With no weakness implant and not a fire character, she doesn't receive any love here. The Dahlia still provides really solid generic bonuses for our break friends, so you can just view this A6 Trace as a special buff for Firefly and Fire friends. Trace nodes are going to be providing 5 speed, 37.3% break effect, and 18% FRES. Only speed and break effect are really needed in her build, so the last stat being FRES is just general survivability. For leveling Prowl, be sure to max out the talent and the ultimate. These will contain super break scalings and also def reduction scalings, the only things that matter for her kit. Skill and basic attack contain just her raw damage multipliers, which are basically zero value for what you invest into it. You will still use them in gameplay, but the damage is coming from the super break, not from these multipliers. Now onto her Eidolons. So E1. A few things are happening in this one. First, the super break conversion at 60% associated with the dance partner now also applies to all allies. Dance partner itself will still remain on just the Dahlia and your main break ally. These dance partners specifically will also receive an additional 40% boost, now converting at 100% for the super break instance. And finally, dance partners can inflict a one-time toughness reduction decrease to each enemy equal to 25% of their max toughness bar. You'll only notice this on big toughness bars, and it's just generally nice to have. Overall, these bonuses are pretty minor individually, but they do add up to give E1 decent value. E2. The Dahlia now has a universal aura that decreases all enemies' res by 20%. This also mitigates the downside of her ultimate def debuff on multi-waves. Originally, I mentioned that you need to save ultimate or be aggressive on each generation for each wave to save for that def debuff. With E2, enemies entering the field are automatically def debuffed for 3 turns, removing this downside entirely. E3 and E5 are your standard trace level increases. E4. The Dahlia's own follow-up attack gains 5 more instances of damaging, doubling it to 10. It now also debuffs all enemies with 12% vulnerability for 2 turns. E6. Increases dance partner break effect by 150%, usually your main carry. Now also adds a 20% action advance, which is a DDD effect, to her follow-up attack. Overall, these Eidolons mostly confirm to me that E0 is a fundamentally strong and complete kit. None of our Eidolons scream a massive quality of life increase or drastic gameplay change. They're all just moderately nice buffs to have that increase either a dance partner's power or her own power. I do plan to test E0 to E6 on my second YouTube channel to satisfy my own curiosity, so be sure to subscribe over there to get notified when that happens. Now onto Lycones. Her signature is going to be best in slot and has some pretty nice universal value for break teams. 60% raw break effect for herself and 32% break amp for herself and your main dance partner. Also provides 1 skill point when applying weakness to enemy on a cooldown per ultimate usage. It's a pretty simply designed Lycone, but generally good nonetheless. Considering her Eidolons don't shine too brightly for me personally, I think that I generally recommend her Lycone over her E1. The 32% break amp is also a pretty rare buff overall, technically providing 32% final break damage increase. If you are a bit more invested in break teams though, then you might have Fugue and her signature light cone, which also provides 18% break amp. This will minorly dilute the value of the Dahlia's light cone from 32% final damage to 27% final damage increase, which is only a minor drop and still pretty strong. For alternatives, we have the following options. You can technically use Fugue's LC on the Dahlia herself, but it does have an EHR requirement for its 100% base chance break amp. Cypher's Light Cone and Pearls of Sweat are both sides of the same coin, providing a nice def reduction. Do be careful about def overcapping though, and make sure you do not go above 100%. And similarly to Fugue's LC, both of these do require EHR to guarantee their light cone passives, so be ready to adjust your body piece if possible. If none of these are an option, you can always use the trusty tutorial mission for free energy for ult spamming, or even the new Battle Pass Light Cone Holiday at Thermae Escape Aid for some more damage amp. Overall, if you're planning to invest in the Dahlia, I do recommend investing in her light cone, since the alternatives either require some EHR to guarantee, or are just substantially weaker in damage and quality of life than her signature provides. If you're just along for some break fun though, any of these can work, just throw an EHR body piece on her. For Relics, we also have a pretty straightforward time building her. For the 4-piece, either Iron Cavalry or Thief set for generic break effect bonuses. I generally prefer Iron Cavalry since she doesn't need the energy with how long her uptimes are and the extra energy quality of life from her own kit. And as with most supportive characters, 4-piece Eagle is also an option. In the Dahlia's case, I don't really see you getting too much value out of it though, since ult spamming doesn't grant the team too many insane benefits. For a 2-piece, stick to the standard Forge set for Firefly-oriented teams, or Thalia for Rappa boot heal and other off-meta carries. I have also noticed some success with Von Whack for the initial action advance, but long-term, you can scale her raw speed to be decently fast enough that its value is heavily diminished. In general, her build is pretty straightforward and she's not super stat hungry, so don't stress about min-maxing her build. For main stats, her build path looks like follows: HP Def or EHR body, Speed Boots, HP Def Orb, Break Effect over ERR Rope. Her best raw stats are speed and break effect, so focus on survivability for body and orb. EHR body is the flex piece for those running any of the conditional light cones I mentioned previously. For rope, I always prefer a break effect since her ERR needs are fairly minimal, but this is preference based, since her ultimate does need to be cycled to reapply the def debuff. On multi-wave content, this is a major downside of her kit that's mitigated by E2. I obviously don't recommend you get E2 just for the def debuff reapplication, so you can offset this with ERR rope. For substats, I would prioritize as much speed as possible for general turn count, follow-up attack resets, and SP generation, and then break effect as needed. With Creator Server Relics, I'm running a nice threshold of stats. We've got 161 speed, 257 break effect, 100% ERR, and decent survivability. Currently, I'm running 4-piece Cavalry with 2-piece Forge intended to support Firefly. Stat-wise though, nothing will change if you're supporting Rappa or Boot Hill, just maybe the 2-piece set bonus. And also for the speed, don't worry too much about it because she does also gain her own 30% speed from her A6 trace. In general, for you guys, I recommend 160 plus speed if you can get it, but generally, just get her as fast as possible. For break effect, anything above 200% works great. If you need EHR, try to hit 67% to guarantee all light cones regardless of base chance, meaning EHR body and some substats. Team synergies. So it's no surprise that the Dahlia is going to be strictly for those break teams. Now our teams are already pretty well defined there, but the Dahlia is basically necessary to push their strength to current meta levels. We have the core break main DPS, usually Firefly, Rappa or Boot Hill, or other lesser known choices like Himiko or Lingsha Sustain turned into a main break DPS. These will usually be paired with Fugue, HMC, Ruan Mei, and Lingsha if running Sustain. Of these units, the Dahlia will most likely be replacing Ruan Mei, since they share very similar buffs and the Dahlia is basically just a stronger and more specifically break-oriented character. Ruan Mei is still a great unit to run, but she's been in this space for quite some time, and more recent units just have a bit more to offer. With that being said, the new team comps are essentially as follows. We have our break DPS, we have the Dahlia, we have HMC, Fugue, or Ruan Mei, and then we have Lingsha or Gallagher. If you're running Sustainless, then just swap out Lingsha's spot with another one out of the HMC, Fugue, Ruan Mei trio. For all intents and purposes, my minimum investment recommendation will be at least having a Lingsha on your team. If you're okay running Sustainless, then you don't even need her and can potentially just run a break DPS plus the Dahlia plus Ruan Mei and HMC. Again, since break is its own niche archetype, I highly recommend investing in all pieces of the puzzle instead of splitting your resources. Now, an extra bonus that comes with the Dahlia is her 30% speed boost on A6 Trace. Unfortunately, only Firefly and Boot Hill can access this, not Rappa. since she cannot weakness implant with her own kit. But Firefly and Boothill can now optimize their builds and run attack percent boots instead of speed boots. This is especially notable for Firefly since this allows her to reach 200 speed threshold in SAM mode with purely substats and team buffs only. Overall, the biggest winner of the Dahlia's buffs are going to be Firefly. Basically, no enemies are safe now, as this team forcibly implants fire weakness everywhere, can deal super break damage on toughness knocked enemies, and Firefly basically has no downtime with the extra energy funnel from the Dahlia's passive. Alright, so I've got two showcases for you guys today, both on lower investment with Firefly and Rappa as the main carries. These are what I would consider opposite ends of the benefits that the Dahlia gives. Firefly gains full value out of A6 Trace, whereas Rappa gets nothing, not even the speed buffs. So Firefly will have modified attack boots for even more break conversion gain, whereas Rappa will have just speed boots. Even though these comps have pretty big buff margins, I'm showcasing them both so you can see that despite Rappa not having access to these benefits, she actually still handles her own quite well. We're going to add Lingsha E0S1 to both sides and HMC E6 with DDD. Okay, so for the first showcase, we've got Firefly, the Dahlia, HMC, and Lingsha. This is basically, in my opinion, like minimum investment besides for Lingsha. We have HMC, which everyone should have, and then Firefly, Dahlia are obviously the core crux of this comp. You can use Gallagher instead of Lingsha, but I find the sustain to be a little bit on the sussy side. So Lingsha, I feel like, is just really nice to have. You can also do sustainless if you want. So in this particular instance, Dahlia is setting up as soon as possible, and so is Lingsha. HMC, we just want to get her ult up as soon as possible. I'm going to be delaying Firefly's ult here until after we get weakness implant and depth reduction with Dahlia. So then after this, we run with Firefly once HMC uses her E, gets full ult, and then goes. Okay, so in this particular case, we get our first break damage from Firefly with both Dahlia and HMC buffs. Because Firefly's speed is pretty high during this case, I did not want to wait until Lingsha went here because we'd be losing basically like half a turn of Firefly's rotation. So Lingsha is going to get her defog now. And then this is basically a guaranteed 0 cycle wave 1. For the most part, there's not really much nuance in this team. I think basically the most important stuff is that you might want to skill more often on the Dahlia so that she gets her ult uptime a little bit more, because multi-wave content is her downside. So during this phase, we do not have the depth reduction on enemies. It's on an aura, right? Unless you have E2. I would need her to get her ult as fast as possible here for the extra damage. Same thing with Lingsha. HMC is the only one that only needs to cycle her ult as long as you don't have the buff active. Lingsha and Dahlia both have debuffs that apply onto enemies. So if there's a new wave of content, you're going to need to reapply their ults. And also in this particular case, Bronya does have a cleanse on Cocolia. So I actually ideally want to wait until after that's used, which is just now. So now when we implant here and have the def debuff, Cocolia will be taking more damage now. So Firefly's dual enemy here is 800k break, and you guys also notice that Bronya is fully toughness locked here, but is still taking a really nice amount of break damage. This is what the Dahlia provides, by the way, and it's actually really, really nice. So you don't ever have to worry about their actual break bar. The only thing is like, you know, the res penetration and stuff like that. Res penetration, def reduction, and any other rare buffs that you might want, like break amp. Okay, so that was the first cycle. Unfortunately, we are not able to 0 cycle. I think we would have to go a little bit more on the premium supports here. This is Lingsha's ultimate. She is still on ERR rope, so I'm getting it as fast as possible. But that is the first time that we're getting defog on these enemies. But yeah, so for the most part, it's a pretty like self-explanatory comp. You guys notice here that Firefly has basically 0 downtime. She exited her ultimate, but had 50% energy from Dahlia Trace passive. And with just 1 E, she is back into Sam form. 2% on Cocolia very soon. It's going to be a 1 cycle clean clear. The Dahlia has 1 more turn on her skill zone, and then HMC ran out of her ultimate buff and is just getting it now. Just making sure I have enough skill points here so that Firefly can use her E. Alright, so now we switch target. We make sure to prioritize Bronya, and we're good. As expected, this is a 1 cycle clear with Firefly and HMC, which is pretty solid, with even more buffs and sustainless. So basically, if you ran Fugue and maybe HMC or some other support like Ruan Mei, you might be able to zero cycle here with no issue. But I wanted to show you guys basically quote-unquote minimum investment, even though not really minimum investment, because Lingsha is easier S1, the Dahlia is easier S1, and then Firefly is also easier S1. But overall, pretty good. Okay, so time for the other side. We have Rappa's team with the exact same team lineup. We have the Dahlia, we have HMC E6, and we have Lingsha. So I wanted to show you guys a Rappa showcase because she, I feel like, is the other spectrum of how weak or strong the break DPSs are. I think Boot Hill is in between and Rappa is on the weaker side because Rappa does not get speed buff, she does not get extra toughness reduction, and does not get the energy refund. So she gains basically no value out of A6 traits from the Dahlia. Here we're gonna go and see how long it takes her to clear. And also, unfortunate, but Rappa is not getting a rerun during 3.8. So I'm just doing this because I want to show, I'm fairly certain there's some Rappa mains out there that are just like, damn, I wish our character got more love, and like, you know, this is like an homage to them. So we're setting up here, and this is a little bit different because I'm gonna try to min-max the zero cycle on the first wave. I can guarantee it if I use all buffs, but it kind of hurts my wave 2. The one thing about Rappa that we want to make sure is that we want absolutely all of our buffs and debuffs on the enemies before we proc her ultimate, because her ultimate is an extra turn. So if we don't have all the buffs, we're basically losing value out of that extra turn because not getting that huge break damage. So I do want to wait until Lingsha, HMC, and the Dahlia all have all their ultimates procced. After this, then we can go into Rappa and deal an insane amount of damage with all these active. Alright, so just a little showcase here of her stats. 3.5k attack and 574% break. I did not show this for Firefly, but it was more. And then here, 1.9 million damage. So with all those buffs active and full AoE, Rappa actually deals a really nice amount of damage. Two target is 648k, which is pretty good. Dahlia with her follow-up attack is also doing a decent amount of damage. And Rappa is on speed boots here, so she is going to be able to get that one extra turn before this first cycle ends. I believe she is 160 here. Okay, so zero cycle wave 1, and then we're gonna just try our best because I think the weak point for Rappa, especially in this comp, is single target damage. So it's gonna take a while for us to bleed through Kokolia's full HP. And also, it's going to take a while for us to set up because Rappa does not have her ultimate. Lingsha is very far behind. So at the very minimum, I'm just waiting until Dahlia can get her ultimate off. So here's one thing. Because Bronya cleanses debuff, that also means that Bronya cleanses weakness implant. So when Dahlia implants her ultimate, I have a very limited window to get maximum Rappa damage off. Because the next time that Bronya goes and cleanses, which is every other turn, imaginary weakness implant will be off. So you'll notice right here, we're going to be implanting imaginary weakness on Kokolia, which is really nice. And then Rappa right here is going to be able to E into an extra turn. We have HMC's ultimate active. We do not have Lingsha's, unfortunately. That's just how it is. So 2 enemy damage here is 545k, which is decent. And then I'm trying to skill spam a little bit more with Lingsha. HMC can freely basic attack until we need to push for her ult again. I'm just sending Lingsha because she's ready here. And you guys notice that the chip damage is also pretty good. So that's first cycle, we're at 69%. Nice. So I decide to E here because I want to fast generate the Dahlia's ultimate so that when Bronya inevitably does cleanse Kokolia, I should be still within a decent margin of getting it back up ASAP. So here, we lost the weakness implant off of Kokolia. So Rappa unfortunately gets CC'd for this particular attack right here, but then Lingsha is going to be able to cleanse her for the next attack. So we did kind of lose like a half attack there, but that's just inevitable. It's just RNG. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. Alright, so there the Frozen is cleansed here, and Rappa's able to go on her last attack. Unfortunately, we're still going to have to take this damage here from Kokolia's Storm. Okay, so the Dahlia is setting up now because she just got action advanced. We get the imaginary implant back on, and HMC is right on time for an ult refresh. I'm thinking about whether I have enough skill points to E here, but I do. So if I E here and then I E with Rappa, her enhanced attacks do not cost skill points. So we're chilling. Okay, so we're gonna be able to kill Bronya here. As you guys can see, single target damage is not gonna be our forte. It's gonna take us even more turns to be able to smack down Cocolia. Okay, so Ling Sha is ready to apply Defog with ultimate. This should be the last ultimate we need from Ling Sha. We only want to be able to kill with him this 30%. Unfortunately, though, let's see how much damage Rappa does here. The single target is about 10%, and then Dahlia is able to do about 4%. So we need, I think, one more attack. You guys can notice that the team's damage overall is quite impactful, right? It's not just Rappa's damage that's doing a lot here. 1%, and the Ling Sha is auto. Here we go. Alright, so as you guys can see, Rappa's team did take 3 cycles for wave 2 there. Unfortunate, but that is how it is. I think that just in general, Rappa's single target damage is not fast enough for those things. Also, this is on the more minimum side investment, right? But this is just still to show that she can clear. It's totally reasonable to clear here, but she is going to fall behind. And the Dahlia is helping a lot still, right? Weakness implant for Rappa is really nice to have. And also, the Dahlia being able to have her deal instant break damage is also really nice. So overall, I think it's still a good showcase. And even though it is 2 cycles longer than Firefly, I think it's still as best that she could have done. All right, so closing thoughts. What do I think of the Dahlia? Well, obviously, Break Queen. Easy to access her full kit at E0, and her signature light cone is a nice boost to break teams, but not necessary. I would say that she is a must invest if you're a Firefly main, and if you enjoy Boot Hill or Rappa gameplay, I think she's still very important to pick up. I will say, I'm concerned where Break is going to go from here. We've got 4.x units on the horizon, so if you're shaky on what might be in store for the future, it's okay to chill out and wait for a rerun if you want to invest in Break. That being said, I wouldn't put it past HSR devs to develop some gimmicks in the future that force a rotation between team archetypes. So for example, sometimes DOT is really strong, and the other 2 are drastically weaker. Sometimes Break is really strong, sometimes Crit is going to be really strong. In this particular case, the Dahlia would be a sweet spot investment to assist in any future Break character that would release. But again, I'd still wait for a rerun, so you can currently peak at 4.x with your resources. Just my honest thoughts. That's gonna wrap it up for the Dahlia's complete guide. If this video helped you out, don't forget to like and subscribe for more easy to digest guides and showcases. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next video. Take care.